months, and that what Israel really wants to do is to empty the north of Gaza of people and impose a closed military zone.
Well, you asked what Israel has achieved over the last year. I think one thing that it's managed to achieve is the opprobrium of virtually all of the rest of the world. And certainly, if not the governments, then the people of the world are now regarding Israel as a rogue state. It's acting like a rogue state right now in Gaza and has been for many months. But it's getting worse, not better. And I think Israel needs to have a deep reflection. The people of Israel must have a deep reflection about what this is doing to them and their own long-term interests, let alone what it's doing to the people who are at the end of this suffering, which, of course, are the people of Gaza and the West Bank and elsewhere in the region. It needs to have a reflection. But look, I think so far as the evacuation of northern Gaza is concerned, possibly, I'm sure that people like Mr. Smotrich and Ben Gvir and some of the extremists in the Israeli government would like to see that, but I just don't see how they would ever manage to achieve it, given the enormous movement of humanity that would be involved. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy of the settler movement and the rest in Israel who would like to carry it out. Don't see it happening anytime soon. And certainly the Palestinian people, for all of their suffering, remain as resilient in their own commitment to their self-determination and their rights and their nationhood longer term. And Israel consistently underestimates that. So I don't think that's a feasible option. But what I think has to happen, it really is time for organizations like the EU and others to look very, very seriously at their relationship with Israel. There have been calls in Europe to suspend the Israel-EU association agreement. That covers 1/3 of the trade of Israel. EU is its #1 trading partner because of the violation of the human rights clause in that agreement, which both sides, of course, signed off to. Time, it seems to me, now to suspend that agreement, to take action. Is the EU up to it? We'll see.
What about the incoming Trump administration? Will anything change with Donald Trump in the White House?
If you're asking me, it doesn't look as though if it will. The record of the first Trump administration is there for all to see. The annexation of Golan, the recognition of the annexation of Golan Heights, the movement of the embassy to Jerusalem and other things and so on give you an idea of how the likely direction will be.
James, thank you. Amjad, I have to ask you for a fairly brief answer. What are we to make of Israel's evacuation orders now for Beit Hanun? Is Gaza City next?
If there will be no ceasefire, the situation will be more catastrophic. And that's why we are urging all actors all over the world. This is the real time to save these lives, these children, from such situation, from traumatized, from these shocks that they are suffering from, and at the same time from food shortage. And I'm talking about starvation, from the diseases, at least to push the international community, that this international community cannot offer anything, at least to get them some clothes to cover their bodies. This is real time to practice the real pressure. Otherwise, we'll witness more and more suffering and suffocation, not only for us as Palestinians, suffocation of all that we believe of the human rights principles, the international law, accountability, justice for these people is needed. Save the lives of the Palestinians. We are part of this world. Otherwise, it will be more and more catastrophe, not only for us.
Mads, Norway's Prime Minister, your Prime Minister issued a statement on the situation on Gaza, saying that its recent attacks on the few operational hospitals there are unacceptable, that the UN and other humanitarian organisations must be allowed to continue their vital work, and that civilians, the sick, the wounded, must be given protection, food and medical assistance. There's been a lot of wringing of hands like that over this last year, but still, here we are. The war goes on, people are still dying. As a medic, what would you say to the international community now as we close this year and enter into a new year about stopping this war, stopping this suffering?
I would say two things. Number one, if you're silent or if you don't act, you are complicit in the history books, in the moral accounting for how you react, and also legally complicit. And maybe you will end up in ICJ like Israel currently is. Number two, I would say this is 100% amendable. It is 100% man-made. It can be stopped within 24 hours. Ceasefire, lift the siege, unlimited access for humanitarian support to Gaza, and start the rebuilding of Gaza immediately. And I totally agree with James. There are methods, there are political, peaceful tools that can force both US to stop supplying weapons and that can force Israel to stop bombing and go to a ceasefire. And that is sanctions, it is economical boycott, blockade for the Norwegian government to sell out all their stocks in Israeli stocks, and do the same as EU and the West has done with Ukraine and Russia, namely impose sanctions, blockade, and support the Palestinian people as they support the Ukrainian people.
So I just want to give the final word to James. James, is there any hope of a ceasefire, do you think, as we're going into 2025? Is there any hope here at all to end this suffering?
There has to be some hope. There are those that say that the incoming Trump administration wants to show that it's got some kind of win on the conflict. Maybe that would apply. I kind of doubt it. I haven't got much faith in this new administration when it comes to a ceasefire. But there's always hope, and I'm afraid that the expectation is low.
Gentlemen, indeed for being with us today. Amjad Shawa, Mads Gilbert,